The moment I landed, I knew something had gone wrong. The coordinates were correct, the air was breathable, the time signature stable, but the world was louder than it should have been. The smell of smoke lingered in the atmosphere, even though the war wasn't supposed to start for another 6 months. My mission was simple: come back, eliminate the catalyst, and disappear. Clean, precise, no distractions. The survival of 3 billion people depended on it. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. But then I saw her. She stood in the heart of the rally, firelight flickering across her face, a symbol stitched in red across her shoulder. Their symbol. The resistance called her a terrorist. The government labeled her a threat to unity. In the future, her name would be synonymous with annihilation. And yet, she was beautiful. Not delicate beautiful, but fierce, raw, magnetic, like gravity wrapped in skin. I was hidden, cloaked by shadows and silence, watching her raise her voice and ignite a crowd like dry grass meeting flame. I should have taken the shot. I didn't. I told myself I needed more information, that I had to be sure. But the truth was simpler. I couldn't pull the trigger on someone who looked at the world like it still had a chance. I followed her that night, not as a soldier, but as something I didn't recognize in myself. Curiosity, maybe even longing. Her name was Arden Vale, 29 years old, former academic turned revolutionary, and the source of everything I'd been trained to stop. My orders were clear: get close, earn her trust, identify the trigger event, and end it. End her if I had to, but nothing about her was what I expected. She didn't act like a zealot. She laughed too much. She cared too hard. She listened. I infiltrated her network as a recruit, under a false name, false history, false heart. But Arden saw through people. I could feel it every time her eyes landed on me like a challenge. I didn't know how to survive. "You're not from around here," she said one night, a spark in her voice. "What gave it away?" I deflected, smirking. "The way you watch everything, like it's already gone." She stepped closer. "You've lost things. Big things." I swallowed hard. "Haven't we all?" She didn't smile. She nodded, and something between us cracked open. Every day I got closer, and every night it got harder to remember why I was there. Arden's touch was fire. Her voice made my chest ache. When she looked at me, I forgot what the world was supposed to become. I forgot who the enemy was supposed to be, until I found it, the trigger, a prototype buried beneath their base, designed to send a pulse across the globe. She didn't build it, but she would use it, not to destroy the world, to reset it, wipe systems, level power, erase every hierarchy, and let the world start over. It would work, but the cost would be millions of lives. And Arden knew that. "I don't want to kill," she told me one night, our bodies tangled, breath still catching between kisses. "But I want to wake people up, even if it breaks everything." I was supposed to stop her. Instead, I kissed her again. Hard, deep, desperate. Because I didn't know anymore if saving the world meant stopping her or standing beside her. The night sky hung low, thick with smoke and distant thunder. We moved through abandoned warehouses, sweat and adrenaline slicking my skin as Arden led a small group of recruits. I stayed close without touching her, listening, learning, trying to memorize her scent. Earth and ozone, hope and danger. Her voice carried through the cavernous space as she spoke of revolution, of freedom, of building a future that didn't end in fire. I found myself nodding at her words, not because I believed them yet, but because loving her meant following her lead. The first time she brushed my arm, I felt a spark that wasn't mission adrenaline. It was fracture, crack in my armor. I told myself it was research, but my heart battered harder. Days bled into nights. We scavenged, planned, avoided patrols. She introduced me to Nadia, a medic who trusted her with her life. To Bennett, the tech guy. Arden navigated them like a mother and a soldier. I watched her laugh with Nadia over burnt coffee, soft and real. And in that laughter, I saw everything I'd come to oppose. One evening we huddled around a makeshift fire. Arden leaned closer, voice low. Why did you join, really? I swallowed. Because I believe, maybe I still believe there's a better way. She looked at me, her violet eyes unblinking. That night, I nearly told her everything. But I withheld it. Fear twisted in my gut. The next night, we infiltrated the data center. I bypassed seals, scanned security logs, while she guided me, calm and sure. When we found the prototype files, I froze. That's when she stepped behind me, hand on my shoulder. Is this why you're here? She asked softly. My blood turned to ice. I shut the tablet. I want to help, I whispered. Her eyes brimmed with pain. Help me save lives. Help me take control. And I saw it then. This wasn't chaos to her. It was medicine, a cure by fire. But when she kissed me then, gentle at first, urgent then, I didn't stop her. I let her taste my betrayal. She tasted my choice. Her tears were blizzard cold. She stepped back. One day, she said, voice brittle, you'll have to choose. And I realized with a leaden heart, the mission wasn't to kill her. It was to stop her. But what if the world needed what she believed in more than it feared destruction? The next days blurred into a fever dream of whispers and wiretaps, coded memos and clandestine meetings deep beneath city streets where no drone dared enter. I split my time between two lives. By day, I scoured the dark web, intercepting coded transmissions from my future timeline, rerouting key intel meant to nudge events after Arden's pulse would obliterate networks. By night, I trailed her through abandoned tunnels, watched her press her palm against graffiti-scarred concrete and murmur apologies to street-level fighters whose eyes held too much grief. I learned what she had lost: homes, siblings, a generation forsaken by a government that promised safety and delivered cages. And as I listened, something inside me softened enough that I couldn't betray her anymore. But I still carried my weapon. It sat heavy in my coat pocket, a small kinetic disruptor meant to muzzle her if she crossed the line. Every time I felt her fingers brush mine, I could taste the betrayal on my tongue. One night, in the shattered remains of a subway car they had redesigned into a safe house, she invited me to stay. She fed me stew made from foraged mushrooms and salted meat. I told her stories of my upbringing far from this future chaos, of quiet farms and slow summers. She laughed when I described a creek, calling it magic that there was room for stillness. And I cried because she deserved stillness. We sat opposite each other under copper lantern light, faces inches apart. I need you with me, she said. Her tone was ache and need. Not beside me with me. I swallowed, words lost in the ache of her sincerity. Behind her, a map covered the wall, grid points marking strongholds, uplinks, safe zones. One point glowed brighter than the rest, the prototype center, where the pulse device lay. It's time, she whispered. We cut it here. I closed my eyes. If I helped destroy that device, it meant risking everything. But I would rather risk the world with her than doom it while hating her. I'm in, I said, steadier than I felt. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand like she was holding hope. The raid was brutal. I led the way through air vents, dropped us inside labs where humming consoles glowed with lethal intent. Guards surged, weapons flared, and Arden moved like a living storm amid chaos. She whispered code phrases, shielded innocence, deflected directives like she was an angel of defiance. I never needed to use my disruptor. I never drew the weapon. There was no room left for hesitation. We fought together. She backed me up the stairs when drones descended. I cleared corridors when alarms screamed. And when we reached the core module, Arden paused before the prototype eyes, cold steel and coiled wires. We do this together, she breathed. I placed my hand over hers on the access panel. Our skin touched, and I felt sparks, electric, unscripted. We triggered the fail-safe sequence. The device began to pulse, its energy bleeding outward in waves. My vision blurred. Arden pressed into me. Stay with me, she shouted over the roar. Stay. I closed my eyes and came back to one truth. I would live for her. For us. For whatever future we could rewrite while standing together. The module imploded behind us with a thunderous crack. I hauled her out as systems collapsed. We escaped in a tidal wave of sparks, concrete dust, and the sound of everything falling away. We collapsed outside into the cold night, ashes of the city raining around us, red lights flickering like wounded angels. She kissed me as sirens wove closer, bitter, triumphant, alive. I whispered, "You're mine." She smiled against my lips and murmured, "And I'm not letting go." We didn't stop running. Smoke and sirens trailed us as we navigated broken streets littered with overturned vehicles and shattered glass catching the red glow of emergency lights. Arden pressed my hand harder, her grip warm and steady. "They'll search the perimeter in hours," she said, voice low. "We need a plan." There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide long-term, but I had an idea. I pulled her to the edge of a collapsed overpass we'd taken refuge under, where vines burst through cracked concrete. "Stay here," I whispered, "and stick close." I activated a comm beacon synced to future frequency, the one I'd used to intercept timeline messages, and sent a pulse outward. It would scramble local sensors, blind their trackers for a small window. Enough time for a shift train tunnel beneath us. "Good thinking," Arden whispered, leaning against me. She rested her head on my chest, her breath soft and reassuring. For a moment, all the fear paled behind the pulse of her heartbeat. But then the ground shook, a distant explosion. Not ours, but close. They'd started sealing zones, evacuating civilians, calling up local guards into battalions to isolate the city block. We kissed then, fierce and consuming, because there might not be tomorrow. Then we ran again, toward a narrow chute that led underground. The beacon pulse hit. Street cameras blinked off. Surveillance drones faltered. We slipped through the grate and dropped into darkness. In the tunnels below, the air was stale and caustic. We moved blindly at first, trusting the echo of our footsteps. My future beacon tablet guided us through maintenance routes toward a deactivated metro shaft I'd once studied in archives, one that ran north to beyond the blockade if energized. I had the codes, but not the power. But Arden, she traced a circuit on the tunnel wall, whispered ancient names I didn't understand. Sparks glowed. Lights blinked back to life. This place was hers, charting the run with knowledge, language, and hope. I stared, not just at her brilliance, but at the harmony between us. We pressed deeper into the city's veins. At one junction, I saw them, a trio of patrols sweeping near a service hatch. I froze. Arden bent down, pressed her palm to a panel. We watched the wall compute decisions, then retract the panels. She led me through the opening into an abandoned station, narrow ledges along rusted tracks. My pulse hammered. "How do you do that?" I whispered. "Listen," she said. "The world tells you how to change it." I believed her. I believed in us. We moved silently, hearts drumming, until we surfaced in a quarter of the city still resistant. Graffiti block walls and rebel safe houses, ruined schools turned into clinics. We collapsed beside a fountain, a shred of clean water spilling over chipped stone. "We did it," I whispered. She shook her head. "Not yet." She cupped my face. "But we did this together." I realized how deeply I needed her, not as a cause, not as a mission, but as my home. She touched my lips. "Let's build from here." I nodded. We didn't know how far we'd come or where we'd go next, but we had each other. And maybe that was enough to rewrite everything. We didn't sleep. Beneath the broken fountain and layered stone, we spoke of future plans, safe havens, supply routes, strategic alliances with other rebel cells. The city had fragmented into zones. Some collapsed, some held fiercely by those who refused to bow to the old system. Arden traced lines on an old map with me, her finger following roads and tunnels I had never thought to use. In those moments, I saw the city the way she did, not as ruins, but as possibility. I saw our place in it. After dawn, we moved again, traveling through half-lit back alleys painted in spray graffiti that grew more defiant as we passed. We met with Nadia, the medic, who greeted us with wide, relieved eyes. She patched Arden's ankle, twisted during the raid. She passed me a mug of hot broth and didn't ask who I really was. Arden leaned her head on my shoulder, quiet acceptance echoing more than words. Nadia caught my hand when I reached for mine, no questions, just solidarity. We left Nadia in a converted bookstore clinic. We knew the price of trust, and that humanity had to be our shield. From there, our plan unfurled. Disrupt the propaganda network, cripple the city's main broadcast towers to reveal the truth about who was enforcing martial law, and broadcast Arden's vision, not the government's lies. Arden led me through archives hidden behind false bookshelves. I hacked comms feeds, streaming real-time transmissions. Her voice, raw and alive, cracked through the speakers and streets I had once studied from afar. People of this broken city, I am one of you. The broadcasts ignited pockets of resistance, but also drew attention. They came calling. That night, in the back courtyard of the old publishing house, we celebrated with rebel fighters, stolen bread, shared stories, laughter in candlelight. Arden pulled me into the circle. She saved this broadcast, a fighter whispered. I squeezed her hand. We kissed under fragmented moonlight. But every spark invites fire. At dawn, the ground shook with the roar of heavy vehicles. Drones overhead, gunships carving arcs across the sky. This wasn't a crackdown, it was annihilation. Arden and I sprinted back to our safe house. Rebels flooded the streets, preparing to defend. We hold them off, Arden said, eyes fierce. But I need you. I'm here. We prepared defenses, roadblocks, makeshift shields, coded alarms. I planted sensors from the future to monitor drone patterns. Arden organized rebel squads, her voice calm, her presence a rallying point. As the first wave struck, drones swooping low, guards pouring into the alley, I fell into place beside her, heart synced with adrenaline. I watched her deflect a charge, pulling a terrified civilian to cover, her every move anchored in care. I realized with gut punch clarity, this was not the same Arden as before the mission. She'd grown into something more human, more ferocious, more alive than any future I'd known. When the drones hit, I triggered a pulse that disabled their systems, the same technology I'd once repurposed to escape. Servers flickered, guard rifles jammed, and for a moment, hope roared. But that moment lasted seconds. Gunfire erupted, and a stray bullet tore through the wall behind me. I dove forward into Arden, arms wrapping tight around her. She froze, fingers splayed against my spine. Sirens echoed as reinforcements approached. We have to move, she hissed. Now. We collapsed through an underground hatch Nadia had shown us, the weight of the battle pounding in my chest. In the tunnels, as dust fell around us and distant sirens pulsed like dying hearts, I realized that nothing else mattered except that she was alive. I love you, I whispered. God, I love you. She turned, breath ragged, eyes fierce. Then stand with me. We emerged into the broken city. Dawn washed blood, red across shattered glass. We held hands like lifelines, moving with fighters I no longer needed to spy on. I wasn't the spy anymore. I was her comrade, her partner, her love. And if the world was going to burn, then at least we would burn together, on the side of hope. We didn't sleep. Beneath the broken fountain and layered stone, we spoke of future plans, safe havens, supply routes, strategic alliances with other rebel cells. The city had fragmented into zones. Some collapsed, some held fiercely by those who refused to bow to the old system. Arden traced lines on an old map with me, her finger following roads and tunnels I had never thought to use. In those moments, I saw the city the way she did, not as ruins, but as possibility. I saw our place in it. After dawn, we moved again, traveling through half-lit back alleys painted in spray graffiti that grew more defiant as we passed. We met with Nadia, the medic, who greeted us with wide, relieved eyes. She patched Arden's ankle, twisted during the raid. She passed me a mug of hot broth and didn't ask who I really was. Arden leaned her head on my shoulder, quiet acceptance echoing more than words. Nadia caught my hand when I reached for mine, no questions, just solidarity. We left Nadia in a converted bookstore clinic. We knew the price of trust, and that humanity had to be our shield. From there, our plan unfurled. Disrupt the propaganda network, cripple the city's main broadcast towers to reveal the truth about who is enforcing martial law, and broadcast Arden's vision, not the government's lies. Arden led me through archives hidden behind false bookshelves. I hacked comms feeds, streaming real-time transmissions. Her voice, raw and alive, cracked through the speakers in streets I had once studied from afar. People of this broken city, I am one of you. The broadcasts ignited pockets of resistance, but also drew attention. They came calling. That night, in the back courtyard of the old publishing house, we celebrated with rebel fighters, stolen bread, shared stories, laughter in candlelight. Arden pulled me into the circle. She saved this broadcast, a fighter whispered. I squeezed her hand. We kissed under fragmented moonlight. But every spark invites fire. At dawn, the ground shook with the roar of heavy vehicles. Drones overhead, gunships carving arcs across the sky. This wasn't a crackdown, it was annihilation. Arden and I sprinted back to our safe house. Rebels flooded the streets, preparing to defend. We hold them off, Arden said, eyes fierce. But I need you. I'm here. We prepared defenses, roadblocks, makeshift shields, coded alarms. I planted sensors from the future to monitor drone patterns. Arden organized rebel squads, her voice calm, her presence a rallying point. As the first wave struck, drones swooping low, guards pouring into the alley, I fell into place beside her, heart synced with adrenaline. I watched her deflect a charge, pulling a terrified civilian to cover, her every move anchored in care. I realized with gut punch clarity, this was not the same Arden as before the mission. She'd grown into something more human, more ferocious, more alive than any future I'd known. When the drones hit, I triggered a pulse that disabled their systems, the same technology I'd once repurposed to escape. Servers flickered, guard rifles jammed, and for a moment, hope roared. But that moment lasted seconds. Gunfire erupted, and a stray bullet tore through the wall behind me. I dove forward into Arden, arms wrapping tight around her. She froze, fingers splayed against my spine. Sirens echoed as reinforcements approached. We have to move, she hissed. Now. We collapsed through an underground hatch Nadia had shown us, the weight of the battle pounding in my chest. In the tunnels, as dust fell around us and distant sirens pulsed like dying hearts, I realized that nothing else mattered except that she was alive. I love you, I whispered. God, I love you. She turned, breath ragged, eyes fierce. Then stand with me. We emerged into the broken city. Dawn washed blood, red across shattered glass. We held hands like lifelines, moving with fighters I no longer needed to spy on. I wasn't a spy anymore. I was her comrade, her partner, her love. And if the world was going to burn, then at least we would burn together, on the side of hope. We emerged into the dawn's pale light, our hands still clasped tight as the rubble around us began to feel like the bones of a new world, fractured and aching but full of potential. The city was waking, sirens fading, citizens creeping out into the streets, glancing at each other with uncertainty and hope, and Arden pulled me beside her to speak into handheld comm devices patched into rebel channels, her voice steady and loving as she delivered the battle's cost and the vision of what comes next. I watched her, fierce and vulnerable all at once, and I knew in my bones that the love between us was more than survival. It was revolution in its purest form. We spent that day organizing cleanups, ration distributions, fire breaks to prevent chaos, and I found solace in her eyes every time I offered water or mocked my own clumsy attempts at organizing a volunteer team. At sunset, we retreated to a rooftop that overlooked the city's broken skyline, patches of flames still burning in distant blocks. She draped her head against my shoulder, and we shared a flask of rationed tea, laughter threading through the exhaustion of our limbs. You always find beauty, she whispered, even in broken things. I pressed a kiss to her temple. Because I have you. She looked up, her violet eyes reflecting evening's last glow, and pulled me down into a kiss that spoke of survival, of grief, of hope, of everything we'd lost and everything we'd found in each other. The night grew colder, and we wrapped ourselves in a blanket stolen from the safe house, practicing how to live again, learning which words to speak, which promises to make, which silences to share. I told her I loved her for the way she protected strangers, for the way she could light a whole street with one smile. She told me she loved me for the way I saw her not as a weapon or a target, but as a person with a right to rewrite herself. Beneath broken stars, we made plans. Rewriting city charters, rebuilding schools, reopening markets, world building through rubble. But midnight came with a whisper of danger. Our calm channel crackled with a single desperate voice. Safe house breached. They're coming. Arden's face hardened, fire and ice in her gaze. Stay close, she said, pulling me up. We descended into hidden access points, catacombs beneath the buildings we'd begun to reclaim, moving as one through the echo of our footfalls. Outside, heavy boots thundered. Inside, our breath was prayer. We reached the chamber dozens of women and men had transformed into a clandestine hospital. The wounded looked up in panic as we entered, and Arden instantly became their anchor, rallying them to move deeper, to safety, arranging medics and fighters with the authority that came from caring for every broken soul. I worked beside her, connecting comm relays, guiding evac routes, blocking off entrances, our hands moving together, familiar, tethered. And once the last civilian was moved, guards breached our entrance. They froze as Arden stepped forward, unarmed, and faced them with calm defiance. I knew they could take me, or kill us both. But there outside, beneath the hum of harsh fluorescent light and the smell of antiseptic and fear, I pressed my body behind hers and whispered, "We are not afraid." She didn't hesitate. She met the guards with that same fearless gaze I'd fallen into, and I realized we were fighting not for revenge, but for the right to be free, to love, and to live on our own terms. The guards hesitated. Arden spoke, voice strong. Leave them. Leave us. Let this end. For a moment, the world held its breath. And then one of them lowered her weapon. And another. And just like that, the tide began to shift, not through violence, but through courage. They backed away, and Arden turned to me, relief and pride in her eyes. I wrapped her in my arms and whispered, "You changed the world tonight." She kissed me on a cracked forehead. "You saved it." And as we stepped back into the night, guiding the wounded to safety and hearing the hum of a city that still had a heartbeat, I knew that no matter what came next, we would face it together, bound by love, by choice, by the unwavering truth that sometimes the enemy we fought in our heads became the home we couldn't live without. The dawn brought new warnings. Satellite imagery, smuggled in by our allies underground, showed government convoys amassing at the city's edges, tanks lining the expressways, soldiers marching in formation. We stood together in the command room, Arden's hand clasped tightly in mine, both of us feeling the quake of what was coming. "They'll try to take control of the city tonight," she said, voice steady but soft. "They'll try to break our people." I swallowed the fear rising in my chest and leaned into her warmth. "Then we'll show them that love isn't weakness." That day blurred into action and strategy. We sent rebel teams into supply chains to distribute food and medicine, created safe passages for civilians to evacuate block by block, patched communication blackouts with our own network, Arden's voice, my data, weaving hope into darkness. I watched her run from station to station, her voice calm when someone panicked, her eyes blazing when someone doubted. When night fell, we moved into the streets, shoulder to shoulder with fighters, worn but unbowed. The moonlight caught in her hair, outlining her like heroine of a myth I never understood until I saw her leading lines of people away from danger. I brushed sweat from her brow. "I'm right here." She nodded. "Because you are my compass." Bullets echoed from the south quadrant. A blast rocked the buildings nearby, sending sparks across streets like fireflies in a war. We dove behind a wall, and rebels pressed past us, a line in motion. As a grenade exploded behind me, Arden yanked me forward, her arms tightening around mine. My breath caught. She looked at me, her face inches from mine, both illuminated by flash and flame. "We lived through this," she said. "Together." I nodded, voice trembling. "Together." When the dust settled, we emerged again, chest coated in ash, hearts pounding from adrenaline and fear. But the city still breathed, the people still rose, and the government lines had broken. And in that fractured stillness, she pulled me close. We kissed, fierce, reverent, raw, the world around us roaring like flames, and the truth was blinding. No battle could stand between us. The night didn't end with fireworks or victory. It ended with our whispered vows in the broken courtyard, our arms wrapped tight as distant alarms faded into triumph, and distant cries of gratitude rose from those we'd saved. She looked at me, exhaustion and fire confounding in her gaze. "You are my heart." I stroked the bruise blooming on her temple. "And you are my reason." The revolution had shifted. We had become its pulse. But what came next would define not only the war, but our future, one we would choose, hand in hand, love as our compass, courage as our shield. Morning arrived in uneasy silence, gunfire distant but still echoing, and we stood on the rooftop overlooking the city's fragile calm. Cracked streets, patched barricades, survivors emerging with wary hope, and Arden wrapped her arms around me from behind, her voice soft. "Can we stay?" I pressed back into her warmth. "We have to." But neither of us knew it would come at a cost. That afternoon, we entered a makeshift council meeting held in the cathedral-turned-command center, where rebel leaders and civilian voices met to plan the governance of this fragmented world. Arden carried authority now, but with gravity. Every eye was on her, and on me, as her partner and her anchor. They debated aid distribution, reconstruction, whether to negotiate with remnants of the old government. Arden stood to speak, her words measured and fierce. "We cannot rebuild on guilt or vengeance. We rebuild on trust and choice." The room fell silent. I watched her, pride battering my heart. Afterward, we were approached by Elias, a former general who'd watched Arden lead with unwavering empathy and asked to serve. He shook my hand firmly, eyes keen. "Your courage saved us," he said, then leaned lower to Arden. "But governance requires stability. Can your vision withstand politics?" Arden met his challenge with calm steel. "I can lead, but I cannot do it alone." I squeezed her hand. That night, as council members dispersed, we walked through the hushed streets, bodies worn but spirits humming with fragile possibility. "Do you believe in this?" I asked softly. She looked at me, past me, through to something deeper. "If enough people choose it, yes." She paused at a broken fountain and kissed me steady and absolute. "Will you choose it with me?" "Every day," I replied, voice quiet with love and fear. But underneath, a tremor. What if rebuilding meant losing each other in the web of responsibilities, in the fading flame of passion? The thought haunted me as we climbed the stairs to our rooftop refuge, where candlelight and untouched wine waited for us. We sat close, the city spread below like a wounded bird. Arden touched my face. "What's haunting you?" I swallowed memory of nights filled with adrenaline and sorrow. "We changed the world," I whispered. "But can we keep changing when it's our world? When it's not about survival?" She leaned back, thoughtful. "Then we choose again. With love, not tactics." I nodded, tears linen soft in my throat. She kissed me long and forgiving, bridging fear. And we moved together, gentle and certain. Not revolutionaries hunting bullets now, but lovers sheltering belief. Morning came again with tasks, aid distributions, council debates, alliances, but every evening, we returned to each other, rebuilding layered trust between us. We taught each other to breathe in peace as fiercely as we'd learned to breathe in conflict. There were moments of doubt. The night Arden wept over civilian casualties, or when I stumbled under the weight of monitoring incoming intelligence that threatened to fracture the fragile peace. But one whisper grounded us. I love you. And I you. And in that echo, we found the power to rise again. The hardest battles weren't guns or governments. They were the ones for our humanity and our hearts. But our love had become the armor we chose to wear in the dawn of a fragile world, ready to defend, to heal, and to build. Dawn's first light broke gently across the rooftops, spilling gold over crumbled facades and rekindled hope, and Arden and I stood on the edge of our city, worn armor aside, hands clasped, watching as the first rebuild crews rolled in, soiled trucks swinging into new agriculture plots, medical tents pitched for the wounded and the weary. We didn't speak. The world spoke for us now. Behind us, council members waited, cameras capturing our moment, not as fugitives, not as fighters, but as symbols of convergence, love and change, revolution and renewal. Arden turned to me, violet eyes luminous, and whispered, "We did it." My heart thundered, "Don't ever end." But also, yes, it never ends, not while we breathe. We stepped forward together, united not just by struggle but by choice. To stay, to renew, to build with fragile hands and fierce hearts. At the dais, she spoke, words steady and soft, uniting citizens and rebels and former soldiers under a banner no one had dared raise before. Humanity's future built on love, not fear. I quietly joined her side, knowing my place was always next to her, both in battle and in promise. Afterwards, the city held a soft celebration, strings of lights, laughter weaving through the air, children's voices rising where silence had been. Arden led me into the crowd. First dancer in a circle of survivors, her smile blazing like sunrise. I held her hand, then drew her close in a dance of reclamation and release. Everyone cheered. Later, as we walked the reborn parkways, we paused before the fountain where we first kissed, now restored. Arden touched the water, then my cheek. "Will you stay with me?" she asked softly. Tears pricked my eyes.
"Here. Now.
Forever." She pulled me close, and beneath the song of rushing water, we kissed again, this time as partners in peace, as lovers in dawn's gentle promise. We returned home, a small sanctuary overlooking the city's edge, light spilling through open windows. We built a life together. I taught in rebuilt schools. She healed with compassion and policy, our nights filled with quiet joy. Our love became legend, not for its origin, but for its endurance. We aged into each other with tenderness, never forgetting the war or each perilous day, but carrying forward the same fierceness for hope. When winter came, we stood by the fire, Arden's hand in mine, watching embers swirl. I asked what she saw for tomorrow. She smiled, eyes reflecting the flames. Us. A world that remembers what choice can do. And love.